Here is another abandoned Disney park that you're not allowed to go near. This was called River County Water Park, and it first opened back in 1976. The park was filled with excited families and squealing children speeding down water slides. It was complete with rocks and man-made boulders you can jump off of, and in the first year it opened, it had around 4,700 guests per day. In 1982, a 14-year-old boy from North Dakota drowned in the resort after going down Whoopin' Holler water slide. There were no signs saying how deep the water was, which is so dangerous, and lifeguards that worked there came forward and said that dozens of people had to be rescued from that slide each day. And then in 1989, a 13-year-old boy ended up drowning in the park. So since then, the resort has been left to rot, filled with overgrown moss, abandoned rusty water slides covered in vines. No one has stepped foot inside ever since.
When you finish this video, you're gonna Google 2 words. In 1959, 9 very experienced Russian hikers set off on a 16-day expedition into the mountains. 7 days in, and some bad weather forced them to make camp about halfway up a mountain. The last pictures of them alive were taken at this campsite. When the hikers never showed up, they sent out a search party who quickly found their campsite, and it was immediately apparent that something horrible had happened to them. All their tents had been slashed open, but from the inside, and inside the tents was all their gear, neatly folded and stacked inside the remains of the tents. No bodies, but 9 sets of footprints walking away from the camp. Using the footprints, they discovered 5 hikers who were only dressed in underwear who had died of hypothermia. They found the other 4 hikers 250 feet away in a riverbed wearing the clothes of their dead hiker friends. They had skull fractures, chest fractures, eyes, tongue, lips missing, and their bodies were radioactive. Official cause of death? Unknown compelling force.
There is a creepy lost episode of Barney that a father swears he caught his kids watching. One day he was looking at the TV guide when he saw that it said a lost episode of Barney was going to air at 7 p.m. He asked his kids if they wanted to watch, and they said yes. They all sat down to watch it, and the theme song started playing, but something wasn't right about it. It almost sounded like the song was being whispered. The episode started as it usually did, the kids holding the Barney doll that suddenly comes to life. But when Barney started talking, he sounded slightly weird. It sounded like 2 people were talking at once. His normal voice and one that sounded darker and scarier. And suddenly he said,
"Hi kids, today I'm going to talk to you about death."
So one of the kids asked him,
"Barney, what's death?"
He then chuckled and said,
"This is."
with his face suddenly turning angry, his teeth growing long, and then he eats the child. And then he proceeds to chase all the other children around, trying to eat them throughout the rest of the episode. And then at the very end of the episode, he sang the I Love You song as if nothing happened. Did you know that there's actually a haunted Ronald McDonald bench in Mexico? This is actually one of the most bizarre stories that I've ever heard. The story goes that 2 young men had just left the nightclub and were very hungry and went looking for a late night snack. They both settled on having McDonald's, and once they had gotten their food, they both took a seat on the Ronald McDonald bench outside of the restaurant. It was a strange bench because it had a statue of Ronald McDonald sitting in the middle with his arms spread out. His face almost had this crazed expression. And one of the men eventually laid down on Ronald's lap and said, "I'm tired." Just then, Ronald McDonald's head turned and looked down at him and said,
"I'm tired too."
The legend says they were so shocked by hearing this that one of them died instantly and the other is still in a coma to this day. Apparently, the security cameras outside the restaurant recorded everything. So it is rumored that McDonald's paid a huge amount of money to cover it up, because they didn't want the public to find out they had an actual really dangerous haunted McDonald's statue.
This is why you should always be scared of clowns. In 2004, a babysitter had just sat down to watch TV before the parents got back when she noticed something. In the corner of the room was a large clown statue that, no matter how she positioned herself, seemed like it was staring right at her. As she's looking at it, the father calls to check in on the kids. She tells him everything is fine, and right before they're about to hang up, she says, "Why do you have a huge clown statue in your TV room?" There was silence on the phone, and then the father just says, "We don't own a clown statue." She immediately drops the phone, runs upstairs, gets the kids, runs outside, calls the cops. Cops go in and come out with this guy. As the police are taking the clown away, one of the officers comes over to the girl and with a very grim look on his face just says, "We found him underneath one of the kids' beds. He was holding a sharpened screwdriver."
This was one of the creepiest Barbie dolls that was ever sold in stores. This was called the Barbie Video Girl doll that came out in 2010. She came with a real working camera disguised as her necklace, and a video was projected onto her back. The issue here is that it could record up to 30 minutes of video, and even the FBI became worried about what this children's toy could be used for. People were concerned that this video Barbie was always watching. Then there was another doll called Hello Barbie, and she, on the other hand, was always listening and was happy to record your conversations and send that data via Wi-Fi to Mattel. So these two Barbies really freaked out parents because it really seemed like an invasion of their privacy.
Warning, this is why you should not touch an old house. A woman recently bought an old house in a very remote area. She wanted to renovate the home, and very quickly she began tearing down the kitchen and ripping all the old wallpaper off. She claimed the wallpaper was extremely satisfying to rip off, like scabs of a sunburn. Very quickly she noticed names and dates in places she was removing the wallpaper. One night she was curious and spent hours googling one of the names. She discovered they were missing people, and the dates they went missing matched what was written on the wall. She called the police, and when they arrived they said, "Yep, it's human."
It's what she finds in the kitchen that's really scary. In the early 90s, a young girl was sleeping in her mom's bed when she suddenly woke up for no reason. She looked at her door and she saw her very affectionate cat kind of meowing down the hall as if someone was coming up to pet it, but she was next to her mom and they were the only ones in the house. The girl shakes her mom awake and points to the cat just as a man is walking past the door and disappears into the room across the hall. Before the man could come back out and find them, they both jump out the window, run across the street, and call the police. When the police arrive, the guy is nowhere to be found, but they do discover that the front door was unlocked, so that had to be the way he got in and out. But the mother swears up and down that she locked that door before she went to bed. A week later, the mother's cleaning their kitchen and she opens up the water heater closet where she finds this notebook that inside is their names and pictures of them in it, along with a pair of surgical gloves. Which means someone had snuck in at some point, was living in that closet spying on them, and then walking around their house at night.